With no experience whatsoever, you just can't even imagine how difficult it is to keep a multiple storyline with many different characters, taking place in different locations, consistent for a longer period of time. Especially when you don't even try to. I think that is exactly what happened to Alien Earth, but it's not because they can't write. I think it was their intention by design. They intentionally wanted us to blow our minds, just to see how far they can go in 2025. With the first 2 episodes, we were sucked in. With the next 2, we were hooked. The 5th, retro-like, nostalgia-driven episode, just put you off your guard, even when you started to have some misgivings. And with episode 7, and especially with episode 8, they gave us all, without exception, the biggest punch in the stomach that the world has ever seen. Just to make it clear, and it is also important, the visuals of the series are just beautiful. This cannot be taken away from those creators who did their job properly. It is obvious that they love their job and put in a lot of effort. The bigger the shame for making a mess of the story, which is, by the way, also full of good ideas. I imagine there must have been at least a dozen writers who threw their ideas into an idea box, which looked deceptively like a box of Legos. It was then taken home by one of the producers, who put it in the front of his 4-year-old son, saying, "Build something from it, little one." With all its logical lapses, episode 5, which took place on a Maginot spaceship, was perfect. Right after that though, at the beginning of episode 6, I started to have a very bad feeling and began praying. Oh my god. Oh my dear God, let us not just end up like after Game of Thrones. Let us not sit there after the last part like someone who has been stabbed in the stomach. Because after those really promising beginnings, someone probably just got the writers of the screenplay drunk, tied them up and dumped them in the shed among the workbench and the coping saw from Grandpa. And of course, it is exactly what happened. And how? Well written, pretty exciting characters, just left unused and forgotten. Absolute lack of consistency in the storyline on every single level. And at the end, almost a bloody, almost final fight. Actually, no fight at all, where they didn't dare to properly, nicely kill anyone off. It seriously triggered all the trauma I got from the ending of Game of Thrones. Just let me show you what made me so unsure in episode 6. Watch this wall. Well, I cannot draw that good, but I guess you can see my point. Look at these warm, rounded forms. Nostromo and Maginot was designed to radiate calmness and warmth, pretty probably to avoid the crew to cut their wrist during the space journey that can last over long decades. Now, the characters of Alien Earth were exactly that rounded for me. Pretty well developed, but not too developed. Not boring, but their outlines are not so sharp that they get stuck in your throat or are too jarring. There's nothing wrong with that if it is a concept. And besides, the series was meant to be about the aliens anyway. Who cares about the people who are only in the story to be massacred nicely and aesthetically, while various kind of bloody fluids are splashed onto our screens. Until episode 6, I didn't really care about the people either. Yes, I was a bit bored of the child hybrid characters. Yes, I saw that the wealthy young man, set up as a genius, didn't really seem to be either a genius or a researcher enthusiastic about science or an insensitive billionaire boss. But I actually liked it at first. I liked the idea that the writers were not trying to shove some basic, obvious caricatures in our faces. Then came episode 6, the meeting of Cavalier and Yutani. Cavalier was already partly shown as some arrogant, vainglorious prick who puts his leg on the table because he is, the cool guy who indulges himself to run around in his pajamas all day long, no matter if he's in a conference room or in a laboratory stuffed with deadly alien life forms. For me, he seemed rather childish than arrogant, and actually it was not really him who made me upset, but Yutani. Oh my god, Yutani. I wanted so much to find out at least a little about the other half of one of the universe's biggest company, especially since Wayland was previously sketched out so well. I was so curious about Yutani's motivations, but Yutani turned out to be so terrifically unremarkable that I felt like crying. She was not only unremarkable, she was actually a loser. For example, at the beginning of the series, she just lost an entire spaceship, because that's how on top of the technology the Yutani company was. A company that travels to distant planets to study alien species. Well, that was roughly the point where I started to suspect that the filmmakers had completely given up writing. Maybe they thought about us, their audience, they would notice. But of course, who cares about the humans? I also came to watch the monsters. And that part worked for me pretty well. I like the creatures of Alien Earth. Of course, I also expected some more from the eye, since I had already been fed and hooked, but it was just running around, being cute and watching. Oh, in watching, it was definitely really good. And what was the fate that the writers had chosen for it in episode 8? To climb into a dead body that had been drying in the sun for several hours. The poor thing surely would have preferred something more usable, but for that, the writers should have had to kill someone off. And as we know, the writers didn't dare to kill anyone. And how is that possible? For example, among other factors, because by the end of the film, the xenomorph forgot how to kill. In exchange, it became this little bunny, duckling, kitty piece of baby carrot. I also didn't understand that if this fly stuff eats minerals, metals included, then what was it stored in? And by the way, did the writers overlook the fact that the few of those tiny flying creatures got free when the Maginot crashed onto the city? Is something going to happen with this part of the story, or will the stray cats just run them up? And then we have those kids, with their minds uploaded into synthetic bodies. I really get it. Disney needed this young people storyline. It is Disney, and they also want to catch a younger audience. The concept of mixing AI, because it's cool, with kids, because they are also cool, was not a bad idea at all. But at the end, we just got a bunch of tiresome teenagers with different psychological issues who were not really happy when the boss, Cavalier, as consequent as he always was, sent them into a slaughterhouse in episode 2. Anyways, it was the last episode where the xenomorphs killed, as they always should. But later, they just stopped it. I have no idea why. At the time, when I still had some illusions about the series, I thought the billionaire genius hadn't created the hybrids just to have someone more intelligent he was, or not only for that. He definitely needed some company, that's true. At the same time, according to my theory, Wendy was designed precisely to fight the xenomorphs. Only this explains why she could communicate with the xenomorphs, why the other kids could not. Wendy must have been a prototype, and the others were just reserves who would have been upgraded later, if Wendy proved successful or if she got killed. Anyway, does anyone else also see that these two, Cavalier and Wendy, look pretty alike? Look at those big eyes. I am sure there are a couple of anime fans among the writers. The only reason they didn't give Wendy huge breasts was because it would have significantly reduced her combat performance. A few things did support my theory concerning the hybrids. Cyborgs probably didn't meet the needs of science anymore, and humans wanted something new, something more controllable, perhaps because it has emotions that can be exploited. If you don't fall asleep in the first 10 minutes of any episode of Alien Earth, you will soon see that Tomorrow, the cyborg, and Kish, the synthetic, is provoking humans all the time. I was sure that one of them, or Wendy herself, will reach a kind of breach with their human creators and turn against humanity before the end of the series. I think this is just inevitable. It is so strange that all three types of artificial persons feel it their duty to point out human weakness again and again. Who programmed this into them? Or if they developed this view on their own about humanity, what will stop them from taking over the world from humans? I don't see any guarantee for that, although I doubt we will get any answer to this question, or any other question anyway, if the writers keep up this level of performance. Probably I am not the only one who, if they ever think about the Alien Earth series again, will watch episode 5 only. Despite the stunning visuals, I feel cheated. The filmmakers still don't want to accept that the technical progress and the almost painfully beautiful execution of the films are totally pointless without a consistently developed, enjoyable story and characters we really care about. If Hollywood just has run out of good writers, or they simply don't want to write, I have no idea. But it is meaningless to continue it this way. They have managed to end one more series without making me curious about the next season. Does anyone even remember that House of the Dragon was promised a 3rd season? I had completely forgotten about it, even though I still rewatch the first seasons of Game of Thrones now and then. My last memory of House of the Dragon is one white-haired boy killing a brown-haired one in a dragon battle. Then I looked it up and it turned out that was the end of season 1. I remember nothing from season 2 because there was nothing to remember. Even the visuals were gorgeous. The struggle for the throne has dragged on for 2 seasons, but the final fight is postponed over and over again. They didn't wrap up a single case storyline at the end of the season of Alien Earth, and my fear is that this is not a coincidence. It is already a trend itself that foreshadows a not too bright future. The experts running the film industry know exactly that the house is on fire. Fewer people go to the cinema, traffic to pirate download sites increases again due to the various annoyances from streaming providers. Artificial intelligence is on the rise, and it is more and more difficult to make money in the film industry. They just want to maximize the buzz and our anticipation so that we subscribe to the streaming service for the next season or go to the cinema in other cases. They try to appeal to young people with characters of their age and older audience with some nostalgia, but I don't think either of them will work in the long run. I really liked the 5th episode on the Maginot research ship too. There were some interesting crew members and it had a special atmosphere. At least it made me easier to forget that none of the crew members were the best of their occupation and made really silly mistakes. Just the same, at the end of the day, this whole thing makes no sense unless they start to let good writers closer to the series and movies.